Chairman, and thank you, panelists. Mr. Yeatman, I wanted to ask you about the sue and settle lawsuits and this concept that, according to your written testimony, every EPA disapproval of a state regional Haze plan and every EPA federal implementation plan has been rendered pursuant to a sue and settle lawsuit between environmental special interests and the agency. I wondered if you could explain for us how that works and what are the practical ramifications for that.
Thank you thank you very much for the question. So it works. I laid it out in a previous answer. Really, it's a function of EPA's inability to meet its statutory responsibilities. I mean, EPA's leaving states twisting in the wind while it waits years to respond to these plans. And because the statute affords special interest the opportunity to sue the EPA to compel the agency to meet its non-discretionary duties, what we have is a scenario whereby EPA sits in the plan, exceeds its statutory responsibility, opens itself up to litigation, that then leads to the practical ramification is a rushed deadline. State after state after state has complained that EPA is imposing these costs, these billion-dollar costs, and conducting these rulemakings on an ultra-tight schedule. So, you know, of course, a rushed rulemaking is a shoddy rulemaking. So it's a sue and settle itself, in this instance, is a function of the agency's failing to meet its statutory responsibilities in reviewing state plans, and the ultimate impact are rushed, poor rulemakings.
And what is the state's role in that? I mean, they would be a stakeholder. Are they involved in that process?
That's a wonderful question. I'm glad you brought that up. In the worst element, if you will, of the sue and settle component of this regulatory regime is that the agency has actively litigated to oppose states from intervening in these sue and settle lawsuits. So that is, states are the regulated entity. They are EPA's partner under the cooperative federalism framework. So states become aware that these negotiations are occurring between EPA and special interests under the auspices of district court, federal district court. States want to intervene. North Dakota has tried this, Oklahoma has tried this, Texas has just tried this. They want to intervene, protect their interest. And again, cooperative federalism, they're the regulated entity. EPA, when they haven't actively litigated to oppose state participation, they've ignored state stakeholders at the negotiating table. So that has been a very troubling aspect. I mean, perhaps the most egregious affront to cooperative federalism has been EPA's activity in the courtroom with respect to these sue and settle lawsuits.
Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Schroedter, am I pronouncing it right? Thank you. In your written testimony, you mentioned the regressive economic nature of this regulation, and I wondered if you would go into more detail for us on how this rule widens the income inequality gap.
Yes, in my testimony, I point out that, for example, with respect to the impact on households, that first of all, Oklahoma households spend an average of 12% of their after-tax incomes on energy. 827,000 Oklahoma households earn less than $50,000 per year, and they spend 21% of their after-tax incomes on energy. 381,000 households with annual incomes of $10,000 to $30,000 spend 25% of their after-tax income on energy. So you can imagine if we're talking about rate increases of 10% to 20%, which is what's going to happen in Oklahoma, that these are going to be the most impacted, the lower income and those on fixed incomes. And it's a regressive ramification for Oklahoma households.
And how about the effect on small businesses? Is that something that would force businesses to close shop and or move to another state because of these costs?
Well, on small businesses, you know, the energy cost can make a difference between making it and breaking it. If you're on the bubble, let's say, I mean, if you're barely getting by and you get hit with a 10 to 15% increase, not only that, but then you're looking at more increases. those businesses, those small businesses are likely not going to make it. They're going to shut down. Whether they're moved to another state, I think, is more for the larger industries, my members, where if the electric bills become such that they are no longer competitive in their operations, they're going to move the production. What you'll see is you'll see moving production to other states, and if other states get hit, then what'll happen? Offshore, perhaps, because it won't be competitively economic to manufacture the product. So that's a concern, a big concern.